Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. It's Stuart Wannop here from Differentiate Consulting. Those of you that are using Qlik or have followed Qlik's story in 2021 cannot have failed to have noticed some of the brilliant feature releases that Qlik SaaS has had this year. In fact, if you just check out our YouTube channel, we have several short clips and videos of some of the amazing features that Qlik SaaS has to offer. Today's video is slightly different though. I want to talk a little bit about what moving to SaaS actually means to you as a business. So you may already be sold on the idea of using Qlik SaaS, but you need to decide what is right for you as a business. In other words, how are you going to use it going forward? Now, moving to the cloud does not necessarily mean, for example, that all your data, all your applications and all your analytics real estate has to move out of your environment and onto someone else's cloud. Although that's exactly what some of the so-called super vendors ultimately want. So the reality is a flexible and sometimes phased approach is what is required. Now we understand that, so I'd like to present to you a blueprint that will let you enjoy all the benefits that Qlik Cloud brings to the table without necessarily having the need to go all in straight away. So to explain this a little bit further, I'd just like to talk about different ways that you can start reaping the benefits of cloud SaaS quickly, almost straight away, and also outlining everything that you need to consider when planning a move to SaaS, whether that will be a partial move or a full move. So before I go through a blueprint that I've prepared on the things that you need to consider, I'd just like to just put into context what the actual options are for moving to the cloud. Now, this could be a phased approach, like I say, where you can use all four movements here on this slide, or you can just go full SaaS straight away. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but there are use cases for it. But I'll just go through the four different ways that you can start enjoying Qlik SaaS straight away. The first approach on the left here is what we call the partial hybrid approach. Now, all this means is that applications are distributed and consumed in QlikSense SaaS, as well as QlikSense Enterprise Client Managed. Okay, so in other words, you're doing a little bit of both. So gradually you may do it by a use case or one particular app. You've started producing apps in Qlik SaaS, but you're also using client managed as well. You can do both. The second point is the full hybrid approach. So in other words, this just means that apps are distributed and consumed in QlikSense SaaS, and then perhaps QlikSense Enterprise Client Managed. That takes care of all the things such as reloads. You may continue to do your development, store your QVDs, etc., all on premise. But you're actually getting all the benefits of Qlik SaaS simply by pushing your apps up there and hosting them there for your users to consume. So no data is moving at this point. It's just the apps that are reloading. Okay. The third part is what we call the transitional state. Now, this is when apps are distributed and consumed in Qlik SaaS, as well as some reloads done on QlikSense SaaS. So previously with a full hybrid approach, all your reloads, your data models, your development, they're all done and they're all kept on premise on your server. Now, whether that's the piece of tin or an Azure virtual machine, it's still your server, so it's still client managed there. In this transitional state, you may choose to start doing some of your data reloads and taking advantage of some of the features such as data lineage in QlikSense SaaS, doing those in SaaS, but still keeping some on premise. And again, like I say, you might need to do it on use by use cases, you might want to, or you might want to stay like that. The final option is obviously full SaaS. Now, full SaaS is pretty much what it says on the tin. All the apps that you've got on Qlik Client Managed are fully migrated and reloaded in QlikSense SaaS. So there is no on-premise footprint anymore. It's all QlikSense SaaS. Now, that would be great if that was a reality where you could just jump to that and lift and shift everything, but it isn't always as straightforward as that because every site is slightly different. So with that in mind, I've preferred a little bit of a blueprint outlining what I call the 5 pillars of your journey to SaaS. And these are the kind of headline things that you need to consider when you're planning to move to SaaS, or even just thinking about it. You need to assess it first before you come up with a plan. Now, these 5 pillars are applications, security, data pipeline, architecture, and licensing. And I just want to break those down a little bit, couple of minutes at a time. Okay. So the first thing you need to consider is your applications. So if you look at application sizing, for example, what you would look to do is look, look at the larger apps, look at the smaller apps, and just categorize them to ensure that they're an appropriate size for SaaS. So for example, QlikSense SaaS does have size limitations for an actual app size. The data is unlimited, but the app sizes are limited to 5 gigabytes. Now, we'd need to assess these and see if there are any apps on your client managed estate that perhaps hit or get near to those size limits. And we're happy to talk to you about those further. And you also, from an apps point of view, need to look at the functionality of your existing apps. Now, as a general rule, everything that is available in QlikSense client managed typically is available in SaaS, but you may have some niche use cases. You may be using some extension objects and things like that on premise. So you need to check that out, that it's still going to be compatible with SaaS. But like I say, by and large, you get everything on SaaS as you do client managed on premise, and obviously extra features on SaaS as well. So to accomplish that, we do an application readiness review. Now, basically, this is reviewing all applications, whether they're QlikView or QlikSense, and publish some observations and recommendations based on this output. So I'll talk about that a little bit later as part of the SaaS readiness assessment that we offer. But I'll move on to the second pillar now. This is all about your data pipeline. And in this, you need to consider 3 things, very basically: what your data connections are, what the data reload tasks are within your environment at the moment, how frequent are they, how many are they chained together, etc., etc. And finally, your data storage. Now, I did say earlier on QlikSense SaaS, the data storage is unlimited, so it's not, usually a concern, but it is something you need to map out and plan for. In fact, at this point in time, it's usually good just to conduct a review anyway of QlikSense to see if there are any duplicated reload tasks, or you're reusing data connections when you don't need to. All of that can come out in a little review around your data pipeline. The third pillar I'd like to quickly talk about is security. This covers authentication, access levels and control, and data security and governance. So the first question you want to ask yourself if you're going to be using QlikSense SaaS is, how are users going to authenticate? Are you going to use a service provider? Or are you going to use some generic QlikSense logins? It is up to you, but there are several options available which can be discussed. All are very secure and should suit your IT policy nicely. You would look at access levels and controls. How many people are accessing one app? What access levels do they actually have? Because you will need to plan those security rules when you move to SaaS. Again, you may have some similar ones on client managed. If you want to replicate them or perhaps even tighten them up on SaaS when you move to SaaS, then you can do that too. And finally, data security and governance. Okay. One of the barriers to moving to the cloud is, a lot of people say, we don't want to move our data into somebody else's cloud. We want it to stay where it is. Well, the beauty about Qlik SaaS is you do have that option. You can use something called forts, but you do need to think about, especially if you've got personalized information, what is your IT policy? Are you happy moving it to a Qlik SaaS environment? Do you need to obfuscate that data? Do you need to anonymize it? You need to think about that data and security governance piece when you're moving to SaaS. Okay. The next pillar is your architecture. As I talked about in my first slide, as part of your initial plan, you need to determine what Qlik SaaS model you're going for. So is the plan to go full SaaS? So i.e. literally everything is moving into a Qlik SaaS environment, or is it a partial or hybrid approach like I talked about on those slides at the beginning? If it is a hybrid approach, obviously there's a bit of planning to be done around that hybrid model. Which applications are going to stay on-prem? Which data reloads are going to occur? Are they going to occur in SaaS? Are they going to occur on-prem? So you need to think about those. And the final thing about architecture is think about your best practice for resilience and backup. Now, Qlik SaaS, I think at the last time of asking, had about, I think it was 99.7 uptime. But what I mean here is your physical apps that you build. If one could become corrupted or accidentally deleted on SaaS, what is the backup plan? So you can do something basic, such as take periodical downloads of your published apps on SaaS and put them somewhere. You could use Qlik SaaS automation for that. Or alternatively, you could use something like GitHub, where you can version and control all your code and back up your apps that way. But that is definitely a consideration. And the final pillar is your licensing. Now, obviously, as a Qlik Elite partner, we do know quite a lot about the best way to license Qlik SaaS, whether you're going full Qlik SaaS or whether you're just taking the hybrid approach or whether you're still using a bit of QlikView. You do need to review your existing license usage, look at who's using what, how often, which apps are being used the most. So that will give you a good idea on if you need to tweak your licensing model or not. And from that, we can plan and map a new licensing model for you. That could be, for example, dual use. So if you're having a hybrid approach, you can have licenses for Qlik Sense on-premise and also Qlik SaaS as well. And obviously, if you're moving to SaaS, if you're going full SaaS especially, we need to manage through that license transition. So that's another component of licensing. Okay, so the components of SaaS readiness, in other words, what you need to do now that I've discussed the 5 pillars. If you're looking for a hybrid deployment, the breakdown of a customer's applications into the respective SaaS tiers is a necessity. So we will run a readiness assessment there, where we observe and publish the different applications and data that you have and see its suitability for SaaS. If you're looking at the full SaaS migration, so in other words, if you're doing everything and everything's moving to the cloud, you need to consider the following 5 points very carefully. Look at your level of dependence to on-premise data sources, and also the level of complexity of your scheduled task reloads, and think about also the dependence of add-on products such as end printing. So end printing doesn't exist in Qlik SaaS. There is a near equivalent, which is called Qlik SaaS reporting, which is very exciting. There's an upcoming video on that. But all these add-on products that you may or may not use in your Qlik Sense environment or QlikView environment, we do need to consider and just bring them to the service and discuss further. Also, the level of dependence on unavailable capabilities in Qlik SaaS. So, for example, if you're using an extension that does writing back to Qlik applications, then you need to consider the SaaS capability of that. So a good example for that is of Infinity Forms, where you can write back data into Qlik Sense. Works on-premise, client managed, but there's also a version in Qlik SaaS as well. But that might not be the case for everything that you're using and everything that you've built up over time. And finally, you just need to look at the level of dependence on unavailable management features. Now, the QMC, or the Qlik Management Console, is different to client managed than it is to Qlik Sense SaaS. Again, most of the functionality and features are there, but they're just done in a slightly different way. But that is something that you need to look at, especially if you've got something like custom security rules. You'll need to think about how you might migrate them across to a Qlik SaaS environment. Okay, so I hope that gives you a good kind of outline of the 5 pillars that you need to start thinking about if you're looking at SaaS. Again, like I say, you don't need to go full SaaS straight away. You can plan and transitional phase there. And if that's right for the business, then you simply stay there. So you're still enjoying these great Qlik Sense SaaS features, but you're not going fully all in with a Qlik SaaS solution. Because right now, it isn't right for everybody. It will be in the future, probably. But the important thing to emphasize here is there is that choice, that you don't need to take that jump straight away. So in terms of next steps, like I say, if you're just curious about the cloud, if you're thinking about doing it, if you're not sure how to approach it, give us a call, contact us, info@Differentia Consulting. What we do is we can install, configure and run a readiness app for you, which will assess your applications on your site at the moment. And we'll also prepare a template for 5 pillars of SaaS migration that we discussed, the applications, the licensing, etc., and also have a planning session as well. So at any point, if you just need a free consultation or a chat with me, you can email me directly. That's stuartwanup@differentia.consulting. So that's stuartwanup@differentia.consulting. And that's the final. That's the end of the video. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you again soon.